Hello and welcome to episode 10 of Women Who Rise podcast. We're your hosts, Nicole Williams and Taylor Lamascolo, and today we welcome another incredible guest to Women Who Rise.
Thank you, Nicole. We are so excited to welcome the amazing Lexy Maturana, founder of Restore Somatica, a business built on the power of breath and breathwork. Lexi works as an individual therapist, group facilitator, and deeply intentional space holder, and is also a world-class accredited breathwork and somatics facilitator trainer. Lexi, you are such an inspiration to so many men and women around the world. Your devotion to health, healing, and the journey of embodiment is truly profound. As a devoted wife, mother, and therapist, you are on a mission to set a new standard in breathwork medicine, restoring female physiology at its core. And we are so honored to have you here today.
And Lexi,
Thank
I
you,
have had
girl.
thank you, welcome. Lexi, I've had
Hey.
the privilege of experiencing your work in person. We met through breathwork many, many moons ago with you as my facilitator. And over the years and many breathes, I have witnessed your evolution firsthand from therapist to facilitator trainer. You are now my facilitator trainer as I expand into this work myself. And that level of proximity is exactly why I felt it was so important to bring you onto Women Who Rise. Your story, Lex, is so inspiring from creating the family and life of your dreams, traversing the depths of chronic illness, and now restoring your health and sharing your wisdom with the world. So please begin by telling our audience just a little bit about how you became the woman you are today through these special moments.
First, I'm going to say anytime I'm having a bad day, I'm going to come and listen to that. Because I was like, yeah, that sounds great. Thank you. Thank you so much for those intros, girls.
No.
Um, that's wonderful. Yeah, so talking about how I became the woman I am, I think it's a two-pronged answer because in many ways, yes, there was a lot of self accountability and responsibility and working through those fears and the hard road and doing all the things that comes with healing and building a business and raising children and life as a woman on this planet, right? It's no joke. But there was also some divine intervention in the along the way. I can't take full credit for how I got here and where I am today and where I hope to get in 5 years, 10 years from now. Um, there have been some very um, unusual divine interventions along the way that have sort of kicked my butt into this is the path you're going. And you do have a choice, you have free will, but just so you know, if you want to make it real easy for yourself, just keep following this path. Um, and even though there was that divine intervention, and I'll talk about that a little, there was also, yeah, okay, here's the path, but you have to walk it. You have to take accountability for your stuff, right? You have to be self-responsible. You have to go down paths that feel extraordinarily uncomfortable. And I had it, and you can probably hear it when I speak about it. I had an immense amount of fear. I was very often in my own way. I was very often in the I can't loop. I can't do that. I can't do that. What are you talking about? I can't do that. Like this is insane. Um, Turns out I can, and I did, but not without a yeah, but not without a hefty dose of struggling and anxiety and fear. And yeah, it's been in some ways a lifetime's journey, but specifically since the illness has been just over 11 years. And so it's been the sort of best of times and worst of times in those 11 years. And that's my driver now. Oh, we're not supposed to feel great and regulated all the time. We actually have to learn how to live in the big stuff and the small stuff and the, beautiful stuff and the really, really shitty stuff. And that has been that's the light bulb. The light bulb is learning how to live there, learning how to live in all emotions. And we say it, oh, we come here to experience every emotion. Do you really? Do you really know what it feels like to experience every emotion? Do you really know that what that feels like in your body? Because we say it, but a lot of people don't. And that's what's gotten me to, yeah, to Restore Somatica and where we are right now. It's pretty wild.
Hmm. Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I actually want to speak into you saying yes to your calling and your path. And I want to
Hmm.
thank you for doing that because
Thank
look
you.
where you are now and what you have created. And now you get to help Nicole become a beautiful facilitator. And she's actually going to be coming on as a support coach in my business and supporting my clients with breath work and all the beautiful
So good.
magic she has to offer. So thank you so much.
Amazing, amazing. You're so welcome. Like how's the ripple effect? Just that tiny ripple effect,
Boom.
right? Like if I didn't say yes, then she didn't say yes. And I remember the night that Nick, you and I both were like, oh, this has to be a yes, you know.
Mhm.
It was took us both by surprise. It was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is part of, yep, okay, let's go, you know. So yeah, so by Nick saying yes, I say yes too, right? I say that to my students all the time. Without you guys saying yes, I can't do this. I've got no one to do it with. So
Mm.
it's a beautiful exchange, it's a beautiful flow-on effect that happens.
Mm.
Amazing. Amazing. So, Lexi, as you often state, breath is medicine. For
Mhm.
anyone listening who doesn't understand the potency of breath, can you explain its exceptional power for healing and transformation of self?
We would need an entire podcast to like just devote to that one question. Like I was looking, what we were talking about today, and I was like, oh boy, we could go so deep in all these, but I'll hit like the basics. Essentially, what breath allows us to do is process the unprocessed, but also it allows us to access the unconscious, or I like what I also know as the higher self, right? You can call it either. Um, and breath has this incredible capacity to allow us to do that on, when I say on our own, I don't mean by ourselves. I love connection and group spaces for this the most, but it's an internal medicine, it's ours. Nobody's doing this for you. You take full self responsibility, full accountability to process your own stuff, which in doing so, you then have access to all of this wisdom that's laying there. We live in a highly, especially for women, but also for men, traumatizing society. And we don't access our feelings. We don't access emotion. We don't, we live neck up. So if you can imagine, I use this story a lot. Nick's heard it tons, but if you can imagine, let's say you've got little 5-year-old Nick and Taylor, and you've been left at the bus stop by mum or dad. And in a perfect world, you know, mum or dad would come and pick you up and deal with all the feelings you're feeling, because a little 5-year-old that's been left at the bus, there's massive amounts of fear, abandonment, you're terrified, you're crying, and in a perfect world, mum and dad pick you up and go, it's okay. I'm here now. You're safe. Let it out. They allow you those sensations. They allow you those emotions. What happened for most of us, especially those of us born in the 70s and 80s, it was like, oh, bloody hell, especially in Australia, you'll be right. Get in the car. As if I was going to bloody forget you, right? Get in the car. And so all of a sudden, all of those feelings, all of those feelings, all of those emotions, all of those sensations, they're still in your body. They're still happening. They're still trying to complete a process, and they need somewhere to go. And they store themselves in the brain and in fascial patterns in the body. And so what happens is over time, they start to build up, right? Those patterns start to build up, and they often try to get our attention because we don't finish processes. We don't do that. We're not taught that. It's what we should be teaching in schools. Breathe. It's okay. You're safe, right? Let it move. We don't teach that. And so what's happening is over time, some get processed, or some we work out, we have a big cry in the bath, et cetera, et cetera. A lot don't. Many, many, many don't. They stay stuck in the body, in the primal part of the brain. And eventually the body starts to go, I actually can't carry this amount of density. This is too heavy for me. Yeah. So I'm going to try and get your attention through mental illness, physical illness, emotional illness, yeah? And so suddenly we have this illness, which Western medical tells us that, oh, well, you need a pill for that or a band-aid for that. And I was just very lucky when this is what, much of my story happened when 11 years ago. I was very lucky that I had a naturopath who was a really good friend of ours and my husband, who mine looked like a very severe mental health and physical health crisis. It looked like complete breakdown, but I was fine the day before. And so in my mind, I was like, this isn't mental. And my husband would say to me, but you're having a conversation. Mentally, you're okay. Like mentally, I was okay, but I was instantly having horrendous panic attacks, sometimes 6 a day. And it was a really, we might get to that, we may not, but it was an intense time. And so what breath allows us, it affords us this ability to finish those processes, to express those emotions and sensations. And then we can go a little bit deeper with breath. Once we move through a lot of our trauma, it becomes this tool where we can access the higher self, where we can access the unconscious constantly, which then becomes our compass. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because we go into altered states. So it's an extremely powerful medicine. And, I've been across a lot of different therapies in my life, and I've never seen anything do what breath does. Not well-held breath, but we'll also get into that. But yeah, I definitely get on my soapbox about well-held breath work. But yeah, and it's like a remote control to our nervous system as well. So we can start to learn to feel things. We can start to be with sensation. And the more, especially if you've got somebody dealing with even just let's take it out of, like, say, mental health and emotional health, and we just come back to somebody who's really stuck in their life and they keep repeating the same, mistakes, and they're never mistakes, but in their mind the same mistakes, and they can't get out of this loop, this pattern. Maybe it's generational, yeah. It allows us to start accessing, hey, what's behind that? Why can, what can we feel in the body, and create new stories? And ultimately, which is the ultimate thing we're all going for, which is just be with more life. We have the capacity to be with more, to create more, to have more love, more connection, more joy, more pleasure, more finances, more abundance, and so on and so forth. And breath, it sounds a little bit like a miracle drug, a miracle drug sometimes. I don't want to glaze over the fact that breath will bring you to your knees. It will bring up your deepest, darkest shit, but that's the whole point, right? That's the whole point, that we go there and we excavate it and we process it and we allow it and we be with it, and then off we go. We go on, and the transformation in breath work is rapid. It's fast. It's incredibly fast.
Yeah. I,
Yeah.
Dan, have very much experience with the on your knees transformation and rapidness that
Majorly.
brings to the table.
Yeah. It's no joke. Yeah.
It really is no joke. But I also love, like, that the flip of the lens, like actually understanding its depth. Like, it is medicine. Full stop.
Mhm.
Like, it is potent, it is
Completely.
powerful, and it is a method that we have forgotten over the years. So I really find it inspiring that it's coming back in the way that it is, and hence why we invited you here, Lex, so that you could do it some justice, because it truly is potent and powerful. What I would
Yeah.
love to know is the specific type of breath work that you teach and bring forth is conscious connected breath. So I'd love for you to share how this style differentiates from others and why you believe it is so powerful.
Sure. So Restore Somatica itself, we do teach all three styles of breath work. We do start to introduce you guys to what we know as breath retraining. That came from somebody called Dr. Buteyko, and that's all about CO2 tolerance, and it's extremely helpful. It's a really important piece of the breathwork puzzle. I was introduced to Buteyko when I was really, really young. I was about 18, 19, and just bored the shit out of me. And my mum tried to get me to do it, and I was like, not interested. And I came back to it couple of years ago to try and help resolve asthma, because asthma has got a lot to do with CO2 tolerance. So we do stick on that, and I really love that. We start with that. In Restore Somatica, we also go into what we call acute intermittent hypoxic breath work, which is your Wim Hof, your pranayama, your yogic breath, your kriyas, your breath of fire. It's wherever there's a pause. So we do definitely touch on them because they're really important. But you're right, we take a lot longer to go into a more conscious, connected style of breath work. And why I think this is so important, especially to women, is because our superpower as women is to feel. It's to feel and alchemize and transmute emotion. It's our compass. And I don't think I've ever met, I mean, I'm 43 years old, so I don't think I've ever met any woman who in my generation, certainly not my mums and grandmothers, who, and they would certainly be out there, but I think they're rare in the Western world, um, who have been taught that this is our compass, that in order to know exactly how to navigate our life, we have this incredible internal compass, and the only way that we access it is by feeling. Now, if you live in a deeply patriarchal society and you have been told to live from the neck up, and you've been told to think and mentally masturbate your way through life because you don't know how to feel, you don't know how to transmute emotion, it becomes overwhelming, it becomes too much. We lose this connection with this divine, communicator in our bodies. Then guess what happens? You are looking at like a world of female disease and a world of female mental health. So what Conscious Connected allows us and affords us, it affords us this beautiful opportunity to allow our bodies to learn to come back into conversation with sensation and with emotion in a really safe way. It's something called controlled activation, and I talk about it a bit. I feel like I'm talking about it a lot recently, because especially if you've got women with anxiety or depression and they're quite terrified of emotion and sensation, and in their mind they have a story that this is a really bad thing. Oh my God, I'm going to have a panic attack. Oh my God, I'm going to traverse the depths of depression. I'm not going to be able to get out of bed for 3 days again. What am I going to do? What Conscious Connected Breathwork allows us to do is for them to experience those sensations and emotions and create new stories, because we're in an altered state. So we take this logic mind offline, and we allow people to experience the body. We, of course, afford them that experience to finish trauma and processes, to access the nervous system. But really on a much bigger scale, for somebody who stays at this work more than once or twice, what you will find is that we all of a sudden allow this communication system back online. We start to reinitiate the intuition as our primary driver in our life. And the intuition is not just mental, the intuition is in the body. We learn to differentiate what's actually anxiety and fear and what's intuition. And that communication system in women is, in my experience and in my belief, it's probably the hill I'll die on, although everyone's welcome to, reality check me in 10 years. If we can get that back online in women, we will see a vastly different society.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a vastly different. So conscious connected breath work, it's a connected breath. Yeah. And the more we do it, the more it activates our system. It takes this part of the brain offline. And then in a really safe and nurturing environment, it allows the nervous system to reveal whatever needs to be revealed. It allows it to do it naturally. We don't push, we don't force. Yeah. And as it reveals, then we start to go, oh, I didn't know that was hiding behind there. Right. And these little traumas and these little suppressions start to come up. And then we start to see things in our world that suddenly, I know why I'm doing that. I know why I'm repeating that mistake. I keep going. One of the big ones I've been talking about on social media a bit lately is like why women go back to, unhealthy and unsafe relationships. And a big part of it is because that's what your nervous system recognizes as love. So we start to create within breath, we can start to create these new patterns of, well, what does actually safety feel like in my body? What does unconditional love? Conscious connected breath will take you to those places. And it's really very profound, and one of those things that needs to be experienced. I mean, we can talk about it until we're blue in the face, and Nick, you know, I could talk about this for days on end. How long do you want to be here? Um, but it's something that needs to be experienced. Yeah, it is a magic that is very, very hard to articulate at times.
Mm, amen to that.
Right.
Mm,
Amen.
Yeah.
amen.
I'm learning so much. So, just for a little bit of context, I do not have a lot of history doing breath work specifically. So, I'm just starting to have it come into my awareness in more ways than one. So, I'm really excited to start exploring it. So, thank you so much because you are teaching me a lot, and I'm very, very
Yeah,
grateful.
you're welcome.
Okay, so just to sort of piggyback off of that, a hot
Yeah.
topic conversation at the moment is the nervous system.
Mhm.
However, most people are still unaware about what the nervous system actually is, let alone how influential it is in every aspect of your life. Can you
Yeah.
explain your understanding and perspective on this with the intention of educating the audience?
Sure, of course. So the nervous system is like it's the body's communication and control network, right? So we have this incredible way to sense the world around us. It interprets what's happening. It interprets, is this safe? Is this not safe? Is this, do I have to run away? Do I have to hide? Do I have to, really fawn myself out? So that's the nervous system. And so we have the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. And then under the peripheral nervous system, we have the somatic nervous system. And the somatic nervous system is all of your voluntary movements, right? If I'm going to pick up my little T here, and this is our somatic nervous system. Then we have next to that, the autonomic nervous system. And that's responsible for all the autonomic processes in the body. And breath work, its power, its magic is that we can access that autonomic nervous system with breath. Now, under that autonomic nervous system, we have the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. And that sort of takes us into, so our sympathetic is like our fight and flight, our parasympathetic is our rest and digest. And if we go even further and we go into polyvagal theory and things like that, there is more under that again. But that's our basic, right? That's our basic nervous system. And it's beautiful. It's perfect. It's not wrong. We talk a lot in Restore Somatica that one of the things, if you are to look at like social media therapy, it's like, oh, you want to be in rest and digest all the time and you never want to be in fight or flight. No, if there's a lion coming at me, I really want to be in fight or flight. So our nervous system is perfect, but sometimes it gets stuck, right? Through repeated traumas or one really big unprocessed trauma where the body doesn't have the capacity or the environment to be able to process, things get stuck in there. And it may get stuck in a flight response, in a fight response, in a fawn response. And I know we're going to go into that a little later, but that's essentially the nervous system. And it's beautiful. It's so finely tuned. It's so perfect. But fortunately or unfortunately, we're living in a system that really is overstimulated to our nervous systems. And so we have got to get back in the body and we've got to really learn to work with them if we truly want to live a life of at least some peace, at least some part of I have 4 children and 2 businesses. I am not delusional enough to think that I'm going to be in peace all day. That's not going to. But I would like to live in a capacity where I don't lose it with them when I am feeling overwhelmed or when something goes wrong or when the dogs break something, right? So what we're learning in our nervous system is to be with all of it as much as we can. Did that land? Yeah.
So potent and
Yeah.
so powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a perfect explanation. It is
Thank you.
truly so multifaceted that I know our audience is quite wide range or broad scope of intelligence. So it's a great summary of how all those things can connect. For
Amazing.
anyone who isn't aware, can you explain somatics?
Yeah. So somatics is just the lived experience in the body. It's just sensation. It's, you know, when we are when we are feeling well, when we are feeling. So as opposed to how the body looks or how the body moves, it's what's the sensation that's happening within the body. And it's being consciously aware of that sensation. And that was why we included somatics in our in Restore Somatica. Duh. Um, because because for me that was the linchpin for breath work. Yeah, it was a linchpin that would help bring breath work and make it applicable and help people integrate it better, is to learn to sense and feel and experience what's happening inside the body. And it's a journey for people who have been quite disconnected, you know, who are very good at intellectualizing and very good at living up here. Yeah, we've all do it. Believe me. What's that saying I say? If you're overthinking, you're under feeling. So learning to feel is a process and it is a journey and it is a very, very important part of breath work. I would argue that all breath workers should have some foundational somatics training, because I don't believe in any way that you can have one without the other. And I was not trained that way. That was something I figured out the hard way on this journey. So yeah, that's somatics.
Amazing. I think that's going to be, that last piece you said there is going to be very powerful for people to hear. So for anybody who
Yeah.
has done training and they only have, one portion of it, hopefully it will inspire them to
I
start
hope so. Yeah.
incorporating somatics as well, right?
Yeah.
So let's dive deep for a minute and talk about trauma and the 5 Fs. So
Yeah.
most people are aware of the responses fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. But for
Mhm.
women in particular, the 5th F, being functional freeze, is also important to learn about. How do you
Yeah.
teach this from your perspective?
Yeah. Functional freeze is so important in women. Because it's actually in most nervous system books and studies that I've done, it's taught the 4 Fs. And that's because several of the nervous system sort of educators that I've done some training with were men. And which is fine, and they're brilliant men, and then they've contributed incredibly to the world of nervous system work and breath. But it's usually taught as the 4 Fs, and I was like, no, because anybody who's had to come out of functional freeze will know why it is just insanely important for women. So functional freeze is essentially where the body will activate enough to keep going, but underneath we are completely disconnected, numb, foggy. There's no pleasure. Our oxytocin cup is very low. There's no libido. Why are you smiling, Taylor? Taylor's like, do I know someone like this? This is sounding a little it's sounding familiar, because it sounds familiar to most women. And one of the big ones that I heard, and I didn't realize it at the time when I started this work, was I've just got no libido. I've got no libido, and they take all these herbs and these supplements, and I was like, no, because when you start, obviously Restore Somatica, we go through the lens of feminine physiology, and the feminine lens, we teach it that way. And when you start understanding feminine physiology and the need for oxytocin in a woman, you go, oh no, you don't need horny goat weed, you need a rest. Like there is something else happening here. So it sort of says it's functional freeze tells us, like, it's not safe to stop, right? But it's also not safe to feel. And it's quite often when you see somebody who's gone through breakdown, who they've gone through that total, I'm trying to think of the word, like, where burnout, they've been in functional freeze for too long, and the body goes, I just can't. And in some ways, it's a beautiful function of our physiology, because it says to you, I'm going to put you on your ass now, because you have to sit here and feel. You have to work through this. And I mean, I could again sit here for a very, very long time and just tell you all the stories of the women that have come to me in functional freeze. And the hardest part of functional freeze is, yes, you will have to stop, because stopping doesn't feel safe. And if productivity is tied to worth oh boy, it's so much worse, right? So quite often women who've been in corporate for a long time, or have been mothers to big families. That was my story. It's so hard to stop. The guilt, the overwhelm, the shame is rife. So functional freeze is a really important conversation in women's nervous systems because I mean, in my experience, it's probably been what I see the most, but I'm not certain that that is true of all Western population. However, I would hazard a guess that it's right up there.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a doozy.
And I
Yeah,
feel
it's
like I can speak from personal experience of being stuck in that functional freeze state and truly
yeah.
thinking that I was out of it until I came to retreat. And so for anyone that doesn't know, Lexi held this beautiful facilitators breathwork retreat back in March. And was it 6 days, Lex? We
Yep.
did lots of breathes, sometimes 3 or 4 breathes a day, learning how to hold space for other people and support other people. But a big part of that for me was I had set the intention prior to coming to retreat that I was not going to work. I was going to be staying off my phone. I was truly just going to be present. And it was in that process. I mean, not only that, but we had like 6 months of build up for this retreat. So it's not taking away
Yeah.
from the immense work that we did
Correct.
prior and that you had
Yep.
formulated prior. But it was allowing that space where I could actually stop. I could actually be present in the moment, be present in the feeling, to be able to have one of my biggest reclamations of self, like to be able to walk away
It's
from
huge
that,
for you.
yeah, walk
Yeah.
away from that space and actually, as you know, Lex, I spent a good part of that, I think it might have been the third or the fourth day, and it was just bawling my eyes out, which has not happened for me in a very long time.
Very long time.
So, yeah, there's definitely a potency in being able to allow the space to come out of functional freeze, but also do so in a way where you are properly held, properly supported. You know, it's not going to happen overnight, but finding that practice, the modality, the facilitator, that can help you throughout that phase.
Majorly, the big thing that I think people miss about functional freeze is that we have to have safety.
Mm.
So if you are trying to rest, let's say in a very chaotic environment, let's say your home life is very chaotic for whatever reason, you might take a week off work and be like, oh, nothing happened because you didn't have that safety, right? The female nervous system cannot heal in chaos. Our environments are so important to us. So if we're even just slightly bracing, that full let go is never going to happen. It's why retreats are so important in my work personally. Retreats, I don't know if they get a good rap or a bad rap. I think some of them are they're not great. I think some of we hear the word retreat and we go, woo woo, dancing around, banging a drum. And it's like, no, really what retreat means for me and what it was for me, the retreats that I went to was not all of them. Some of them were very unheld and very chaotic and very unsafe. Ironically, breathwork is so powerful that I still got so much out of it. Yeah. You can still have incredible insights and breakthroughs with terrible facilitators. But in what we try to create at Restore Somatica is just a really, really safe space where women can finally go, oh, okay, I can let this go, and to create this safety. And that's where retreats can be powerful because for me personally, I have a very safe marriage. I have a safe home, but there is a lot of moving parts. There's 7 people in this house. There's 6 dogs. There's, we both run our businesses from home. Like there is still a lot of moving parts. It is not a space off always, I should say, where I can fully recharge. It's just not possible. So our everyday lives can be so hectic. They can be so chaotic that what we try to provide in retreat is this space where people can actually fully know what it feels like. See, once you have an access point to the sensation and what regulated, peaceful, grounded in the body feels like, then you can, yeah, you're going to go home and you are going to have to deal with the outside world. And obviously, we give you a lot of tools and resources to deal with that. But you have no access point. If you've never felt it, or what does Jimbo call it? Reference points, right? He loves the word reference points. He's like, if your body's got no um, reference point for what that feels like, it's very, very, very hard to then go and create it in your everyday life. So we do our best to take people into that so they can feel, oh, is this possible? This kind of sensation, this vibration, this frequency, this joy, this love, this peace, this whatever. And now, how can I now go out into the world and recreate that? So, yeah, retreat is really important, and functional freeze is such it can be a bit complex, it can be a bit complicated in the way that it shows up. So, retreats can be a really, really good way to, start moving your way out of that and start staying still. You can't come out of functional freeze without rest and stillness. It's just not, you're button heads.
Yeah. And I think too important is, Lex and I, we've spoken about this previous, is that you can't be in the state of stress and pleasure at the same time. So I think that's, it's really important for women to understand, where you were speaking to women coming in with that low libido and, not feeling like they want to maybe be intimate with their partner, or, be able to receive pleasure, whether it's through, doing some form of self-care or anything like that. But it's important to understand that these two things can't play at the same time. It's either stress or
Yeah.
it's pleasure. So
Yeah, cortisol and oxytocin,
yeah.
they are, they're on a scale and you can't access it.
Mm. So most people think that breath work is a simple and safe practice. And Lexi, you have witnessed both the light and the dark of it. So for
Sure
anyone
have.
listening, what are the repercussions of improper use, facilitation,
Hmm.
and education? And what is the importance of safe practice within breath work?
Yeah. So I say, I'm going to tell a story, and I just want to preface telling this story that this is the only time in being exposed now to breathwork for nearly 10 years that this has ever had, that I've ever, heard of this happening to this extreme. But it's to tell the story of my mum. So the way that I was actually introduced to breathwork was that my mum would go to India, and a very, very well-respected, um, retreat, yoga, spiritual retreat, very, very wealthy people, famous people, all the things. Right? It's not something that was in any way a little bit dodgy. And she went, and they had a so-called excellent facilitator from America come over, and they put her through holotropic breath work. And she started to get a really bad headache. And she said, I'm going to take myself back to my room, which she did. And by the time she got there, she had gone blind. She had a grand mal seizure. And the seizure was so severe that when she has fallen on the floor of her little apartment, she shattered her shoulder so badly. So she now has 14 pins and screws. I had to fly back to Australia to put 14 pins and screws to put it back together. So when I was introduced to my first therapist who was doing breath work, and she said, we're going to do breath work, I said, oh, fuck no, absolutely not. And she was like, why are you so afraid of breath work? And I said, I told her the story of my mum, which had only been 12 months prior. And she said, let me ask you a question. Does your mother have high blood pressure? And I said, yes, she does. And she said, well, that could have all been avoided with that one question. And she said, do you have high blood pressure? And I was like, no. She said, well, on the ground, off you go. Like, this is, we're going to do this. And, that's where my story started. But, so to have a response as intense as my mum's, as my first introduction to breath work, has never left me. I often say to mum, like, you must have just been my little like guinea pig, that's like, hey, this can happen. So if you're going to go down this road, you got to do it properly, girl. Like it was very serendipitous, but not in the loveliest way. And she did get her sight back. I think it was after about 48 hours, although the neurologist in Australia said that's rare. So it was a really, really, really horrendous experience. Um, over, I think that was 2017. So what's that been? About 9 years. Over the years, I have heard other horror stories, but they're rare. They are rare. So I don't want to scare anybody off breath work. I tell that story to reiterate how important it is to do your research, because the power of breath is, if we are going to essentially use it as a remote control to the most important part of your system, which is your nervous system, then you really need to know what you're doing. And, we see a lot of, and if you've ever been on my Instagram, you've heard me say this, but we see a lot of the 12-week online courses, right? And it's like, you cannot become a breathwork practitioner or facilitator in 12 weeks online. It's not possible. There is a lot to this medicine. And, Restore Somatica, we put together a 12-month course, but I could have easily made it a 2-year course. And maybe one day we will do that, but I'm really content with what we created. But it is a powerful medicine, and I've been in unsafe situations that have really nothing to do with the breath itself, but the containment of the spaces, which can be really uncomfortable and really hard to deal with and quite confusing, because you're in the most vulnerable state. You are in the most incredibly vulnerable state when you're in breath work. And the key point you want is that you feel safe with who you're working with, that they've got their back, that you've done a little bit of research and been like, okay, yeah, they studied here, and that looks like a decent course to me. And it's an unregulated industry. I imagine it will always stay unregulated, because I don't think that the powers that want to be really want to acknowledge the power of breathwork, even though much of modern day breathwork really does come from the military and, Navy SEALs and them using it. But yeah, so having been in both incredibly safe spaces and not so safe spaces, I can say that, you have to do your research. Things can go, they can get hairy, and you're exposing yourself in a way that I don't personally, it's like standing naked in the middle of a highway. You wouldn't go do it. It's not well, some people might, but I wouldn't, or standing naked in the middle of a shopping center. It can feel like that if you are not properly held. The other things that I would avoid for most people is the really, really big groups. I have been involved in communities where they did the big, 50, 60, 70, 80 people. And I would never, ever, ever put myself in a position like that again, because I wasn't taught at the time what was happening to people. But now, especially through somatics education, nervous system education, I'm like, okay, that's flooding, that's disassociation, that's not catharsis, that's something else, likely flooding. And I would say that if you are new to breathwork, really talk to your facilitator or your practitioner, and ask them, well, how big's the group? What sort of music do you use? Is there integration practices for afterwards? Just inform yourself. Yeah, there's a reason it's so powerful, which is wonderful, but any type of energy, any type of power can be misused.
Not only that, but then you have, the collective energy itself amplifies, especially in a group setting, amplifies everything that you are doing. Like, yes, you can be potent doing one-on-one and it is powerful, but yeah, in those group settings, it's just, you've got like
It's
20,
wild.
20 people, or even the smaller groups, if their energy is just,
Yep.
more potent at the time.
Chaotic.
Like, oh,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, it's big, and you better, make real certain that you have a facilitator that really is, has excellent containment, can be the still point for that entire group. I've definitely run groups, especially in the early days where I probably wasn't as grounded as I should. And and you're like, whoa, this is like really throwing me. And it's you can't really learn it without learning it. You can't really learn the lesson, but it's like, okay, next time I can't get away with running to the shops and running around with the kids like a headless chook and being a bit ungrounded. It's just, it doesn't serve anybody, so you need to have a practitioner that has that awareness and that, capability of calling their own shit out as well and being like, yeah, I shouldn't do that again. That's probably a no, and working your way through it.
Yeah, I think it also speaks to, social media can be both a blessing and a curse in the sense that people are so equipped to portray themselves as healed or as efficient or as whatnot, but then underneath the surface, like how much have they really done the work? And that I think is like part of that safety where you can step into the space with someone, but if they have their own unhealed trauma, will they be projecting that? Will they be holding you safe enough? Will you trigger them? Like, what is the dynamics there? And a good healer knows that they always have their own shit to deal with. However, they have the processes to be able to put their own shit aside and help
Yep.
you through your process, or to own it and be like, today's not the day, guys. We're gonna like
Yeah.
just another day.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So,
that's something that is so beautiful and it's kind of freeing as somebody who my big thing is safety, both being safe and teaching other women, and that's been part of my experience is having a lot of and learning a lot of what not to do. I've had some amazing experiences and some beautiful education, and I've also had a lot of education around that absolutely cannot be what happens in my world. And so safety is such a big part of that. And I think that as women, we need to step away almost a little bit from the cult of academia that says, I know this and I know that, and I know this and I know that, and actually embody the I don't know and I can't do it today. And I'm very human and I am a mother and I'm a wife and I am a female who's just, I don't know, started the first day of my bleed and I can't. This is it. I'm out today. And being able to say that, you know, and because sometimes I think we get a little bit confused when we say, oh, we've got to show up, we've got to show up. And yeah, there is a time to put on your big girl panties and show up. I completely agree. And there is a time where, and I'm really big on this, and Nick would have seen this in my course, where I would be like, if I can still show up at 80%, I will. But if I'm getting down to 70%, no, you guys aren't going to get the best of that. You deserve better. And there was a couple of times where we would have a scheduled call and I'd be like, guys, we're out. This is not going to happen tonight. And I apologize, but it's more important that I show up. I also think it's that we show up messy. Like, yes, I've got my hair done and my makeup done today, but I think almost every class I teach, I've usually just come from the river. I've probably still got my swimmers on. My hair is in a bun and I'm like just feeling wild and free and grounded. And I've just come out of nature and I'm like, and this is how I teach, right? This is really important. And Nick can attest to that. So as coming back and pulling that back into containment, it's like being human with your containment, right? Having both the skills to contain and hold and deal with people's projections and their own traumas and triggers, and also knowing I have to have a human day. I'm human today, you know. And as women, we really, really we need to give that to each other because holy geez, nobody else is going to. No, nothing out there is going to give that to women to allow them to be a little messy and a little human, or a lot messy and a lot human.
But not only that, it truly does. You showing up in your most natural, authentic self allows us to express in the same ways. How many times have I written into the group being like, I'm showing up in my pajamas today, guys? Like, it's just like
Yep.
your family now. This is it. Like, just accept
This is where we are. Please, yeah. And how much peace, like how much relief and peace do you get
Yeah.
being able to show up to a dozen, men and women, a gaggle of humans where you can just, I think one night, correct me if I'm wrong, in the bath?
Oh yeah, when I
Were
was
you
sick. And I was
when
like,
you
the
were
camera
sick?
wasn't on, guys.
Yeah, and I said to Nick, she went, no. I was like, just stay off, have a rest. She's like, no, no, I'll be fine. And she was not well. So she popped herself in the bath, and I was like, that's a safe woman. That is a testament to this container because that's a safe woman.
Yeah.
Like, so I feel that those spaces, they're invaluable to women right now. We need that. We need that so desperately between each other to just, be able to be with a very human, messy self.
Yeah, and I think Lex too, the saying that you always say, please correct me if I'm wrong, is the container is more important than the content.
Always. I think I nearly just sent you guys crazy talking about that. Because in breathwork facilitation, you are the container. It doesn't matter what you know. In breathwork and somatics, yes, education is important. Yes, you need to show that you have done your due diligence and you have studied, and that is important to show the integrity of the work, of course. But when you're in that relational aspect, when you are in that limbic resonance with your client or clients, they don't give a shit what you know. What they care about is how safe are you? How much can you contain, right? The container, you're it. You are the container. And so we see so much women's work out there right now. And I've been on the other end of this. It's really hard to be on the other end of an unsafe container, and the other, especially when you're a student and you're learning. So it can do real damage. It can be deeply confusing. It can be quite chaotic to your nervous system. So yeah, we say that a lot. Oh, no, more than a lot. We say it constantly. The container is more important than the content. It's important what you know. It's important to study, and knowledge is beautiful. But if you don't embody it, and if you don't contain people when you're holding them, walk away and figure out how to do that and come back to the work, because it's the be all and end all. Yeah, again, one of those hills I'll die on.
Thank you, Lex.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. Absolutely. So, to all of our beautiful listeners, we are going to shift focus a little bit and lean into some more controversial topics, which I'm so excited for because I love a little disruption. So, I love it.
Love it.
I love it. So, Lexi, what is your opinion on the patriarchy and how does a patriarchal society influence women and their nervous system?
How long have you got? Because that is another one that we could just do a whole podcast on, right? Are you a Scorpio, Taylor?
I'm a Libra.
Oh, are you really? Oh, I
Yeah.
thought maybe you're a little scorpion in there with all that controversy, because that's me. Um, okay, so how does the patriarchy? I guess we come back very, very root, very, it's not a generalization, but it's definitely, if we had to give an umbrella term on how it affects women, it's safety. It doesn't provide any safety, right? We have extremely delicate nervous systems. We have cyclical bodies. Yeah. We have deeply emotional experiences. We have big hearts. We have a physiology that's quite literally designed to create birth and nurture. I would love to fucking find that in this system, but I can't. It's not there. So, how the patriarchy affects us is really that it disconnects us from our bodies. It disconnects us from that cycle of create, birth, nurture, whether it's children, whether it's a business, whether it's a cake, whether it's a recipe, whether it's a new garden, whether it's a piece of art, whether it's a breathwork retreat. Like it doesn't matter. That is part of who we are, and that is not nurtured in any way. We are constantly coming up against things that make our nervous system feel unsafe. One of the other ways that one of the things that we talk about a lot in Restore Somatica is big T trauma and little T trauma. And we talk about it because when I came across this concept, when I was taught this, because big T trauma, right? We think of the really big, impactful, obvious things that happen to people in their life, and they're horrible. Little T trauma is just as damaging. And patriarchal conditioning comes in here. And it's something that I wouldn't go as far as say I argue. My husband would say I would, though. Yeah, I probably argue a bit about this with a lot of other breath teachers and things, is that if you don't understand little t trauma and what patriarchal conditioning does to a woman's nervous system, you're going to find it very difficult to be able to hold them. Because what happens is years and years of close your legs, don't access sexuality as energy, sex is bad, don't use your voice, children are better seen and not heard, if I express my emotions I'm seen as crazy and unhinged, if I want to be creative instead of going to school and being a doctor or a lawyer, I'm seen as a hippie. If I want to home birth instead of have a medicalized birth or birth in the hospital, I'm seen as a hippie. My mum tells this story where she, back in the day when she was pregnant with me, wanted to have a water birth. It was called a La Boya method back then. And the doctor quite literally laughed in her face. And so little things like that, how we want to birth, how we want to mother, how we want to educate, like we could write a list that's quite literally thousands of points long, okay? So this all becomes conditioning to the little girl, yeah? And over time, what it means is many, many, many of our needs get unmet as women. Little t trauma is literally that. It is the constant unmeeting of needs. So just, we're not even talking about what happens in the home. We're just talking societally. Societally, what happens to women in a patriarchal system in this is little t trauma, and it's constant, right? Oh, that little boy hit me in the playground. Oh, that means he likes you. What the fuck? Where did that come from?
Yeah.
It was like, perfect example. It means he liked what? Really? That's what we're training into little girls' nervous systems? That I get treated like shit, it means he loves me? Oh, this explains a lot, right? This explains a lot. So when we start talking about patriarchy and the nervous system, we have to talk about little t trauma and what the societal conditioning has done to women over the years, for 5,000-6,000 years now, because it's a whole host. It's an absolute cacophony of unmet needs, whether that be as a little girl learning to feel your feelings, as a little girl learning to know what safety feels like, when you get your first bleed, what it feels like when a boy breaks your heart. There's so many, what you wear, whether you can speak up for yourself, how you're held. I used to get kicked out of religion class. Nobody is surprised by this, but, you know, all the time. And because I would argue certain things in the Bible that made zero sense to me, instead of actually, and I don't expect this from my somewhat uneducated teacher, but why were we not encouraging little girls to speak up? Why was I being kicked out of class and punished because I was disagreeing with, you know, things in the Bible? So there's all these tiny, very, very subtle unmet needs that happen to women and their nervous systems. And so what happens is they come to someone like me and they say, but I don't have any trauma. Nothing terrible. I was loved. I had a roof over my head. I had parents who cared about me. I had food on the table. I got to do activities, and they feel quite a lot of shame that they are dealing with these it's usually mental health, right? What I call emotional health issues. And they're dealing with a lot of shame because they're like, I don't feel like I had a lot of massive trauma, right? And then we start breathing them. And then they start going, oh, yeah, I was constantly told that I was not allowed to become a such and such because girls don't do that. Or I was constantly, told, don't eat that or you'll get fat and boys won't like you. And they start to see that these very, very old, right? And it's generational. It's come from, mum, grandma, auntie, teacher, dance teacher. I was told to lose weight at 6. My dance teacher came over to me and I'd just done a modeling thing. I danced and sung my whole life. And and she came over and she said, Lexi, you did so great today. And then she poked me in the belly and she said, now we just got to get rid of this. I was 6,
Mm.
right? That created a whole host of issues in my life that took a lot of unraveling around body image and my belly. And I have big boobs and a belly. And, we just, when did we do this to women, right? So there's these tiny little subtle things that happen in our lives that patriarchy and patriarchal conditioning are deeply responsible for. We haven't even touched on violence against women, oppression of women, like we can go into all that big stuff too, and that is deeply, deeply important. Um, big T trauma, how the courts currently deal with, keeping women safe from abuse. It's such a massive topic. What I want to speak to you today and what I think is really important is for the women who can't quite work out how to get from here to there. And they go, but I don't have any massive trauma. I don't have any, and I would argue that actually you do. It's just nobody's told you it's called trauma. Nobody's told you this is what patriarchal conditioning does to women. It quite literally sucks our life force out of us until we are a shell of, you know, that playful, hopeful little girl that we would have had a hopefully small amount of time at being in our childhood.
Mm. That
I
was,
Yeah.
find it, sorry, Nicole.
there you go.
Actually, it's interesting. It's almost like the person you're referring to is that person that just had like a nice upbringing, right? Where you wouldn't because they had food on the table, and they had their basic needs were met. They're thinking that trauma is like something massive, right?
Yeah.
So they don't associate themselves with having received any or picked up any along the way, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting that there's also a lack of awareness around what it's so sneaky.
Mm.
It's
So
so
sneaky.
it's so sneaky. And so that the lack of awareness from the beginning is actually where it starts,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
It is. And it's I sort of was a bit of a double whammy. I had a wonderful childhood. This was sort of my story. I did have a couple of big T traumas as I went into my sort of late teens adult life. But once I'd moved past them, I was still confused as to why I was still angry and I couldn't move into this and I couldn't move into that. And I had real terror showing up online. When I first started this work, I didn't have fear, I had genuine terror. And it was little things like, I was sent to the best private girls' school that money could buy at the time, where I was put in elocution lessons at 4, being told how to speak and manners. And I had a very English grandfather, so I knew like which fork went where and how ladies spoke. And it's why I probably swear so much, because it's me reclaiming my voice and telling everybody who tried to put that stuff on me to please go fuck yourself, because we're not doing that anymore, right? So it was these little subtle conditionings, and I think bless my mum, I think she figured it out when I was about 9, and she moved us up to where Nick and I live now, which was way out of the city, bought me a horse, let me run free. I had a wonderful group of friends growing up. Totally took me out of that environment. And I think it was for her as well. I think she needed it as well. And it was part of a bit of a reclamation for her. But I felt so yeah, I felt quite a lot of shame of like, I had a beautiful upbringing. I was loved. I was, spoiled rotten. And yet there were these very subtle, sneaky, conditioning things that came through in my life that, you know, really did a huge amount of damage. And I was like, oh, and this is little T trauma, right? Welcome to my life. Let's figure this out. And then that was sort of what I started to really attract women. Was it wasn't, of course, I, do attract people who've been through a lot of big things and some of the big things I've been through, but yeah, this very subtle. It's wild. And it's sneaky. That's such a good word for it.
Mm. Yeah, I love your explanation when you speak to this. I always feel so captivated and just like thrown into like, oh my gosh, yeah. And I've heard this like 100 times.
I think a lot of women feel very seen when I speak
Yeah.
to conditioning being a trauma and patriarchal conditioning being a trauma, right? Our
Mm,
body's being commodified.
mm,
Yeah. The internal misogyny that exists within many of us, and we have to unravel the you know, internal capitalize like the capitalization, the capitalism that's sitting in our bodies that says our worth and work. Like these are big drivers for women because we just don't fucking do it like men. We
mm,
can't. I guarantee all three of us have tried, right? And at some point we've been sat on our ass and been like, the fuck, this isn't working. I'm doing everything they told me to do. I'm doing everything they told me to be. I was a good girl. I was smart. I was this, I was that, I was this, I did all the things and I'm exhausted. I'm miserable. I'm depressed. I'm unhealthy. I'm whatever. Right? I'm anxious. I've got no marriage. I've got no love life. You know, I can walk into an office and I can be amazing at my job, but I'm screaming at my children on the way out.
mm,
Yeah.
mhm,
I did everything right. I did everything right. I actually remember saying that to my naturopath when I was still in the real depths of being chronic illness, saying, "But I've done everything right." And it was my husband who was sitting there next to me, and he goes, "Everyone does everything right. Nobody gives a fuck. It's not right for you."
mm.
He really pulled me up on it, and I was like, "Ooh, that triggered me. I kind of want to punch you." But he was right. He was right, and men are, they are victim of patriarchy in their nervous systems too, because they just get sent off to war. Go be a good boy.
Mm,
Yeah. Go be subservient. And we sell subservience as being a good man when we send them off to, right now we're in a war and we've just sent a whole bunch of them off to war. Yeah.
mm.
It's a
Yeah.
wild this has been the last 3 years of my life, is really untangling what patriarchy gave me. And I don't think I'm halfway through. I think I got the big stuff out of the way, but I'm still, oh, okay, yeah, that was conditioning. That's not me. That was somebody saying, this is how you are approved of, or this is how you're loved.
Mm. Yeah. And super potent that you brought in how it affects both men and women because it is,
Majorly. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
it's full
Really,
spectrum.
really important.
Yeah. So aside from this,
Yes,
uh, you have dedicated your ongoing research to female physiology. So what led you
yes.
to this approach and why is it
Yep.
so important for people to understand?
I guess we covered a lot of that in what we just spoke about in the patriarchy and our systems. Understanding that women are cyclical beings. There's so much more conversation about this. I
Mhm.
didn't know this when I was sick. I remember calling a girlfriend. I can tell you exactly where I was in my bathroom. We were still living where we used to live down the South Coast, and saying to her, "Hey, have you ever noticed that really only working out feels good like 2 weeks of every month?" And she was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "That's really weird." Now, I was really unwell at the time, and getting my period was so destabilizing for me. They actually didn't leave the house about 2 to 3 days before, and the first 2 to 3, I was almost agoraphobic with it. The anxiety was so extreme when I would get my period. And so I started to obviously see the pattern. And this was obviously after illness and after having 4 children. And I started to watch this pattern. And then a girlfriend of mine, she lives in Denmark, and she recommended, I can't remember if she recommended it to me or she just popped it on her socials, and she said, "Read Witch" by Lisa Lister. And I have never read a book that made me feel so seen in my life. Like I was just like, wait, would have been 33 at the time, maybe. And I was like, wait. And I was furious at one point. Why has nobody told me we're cyclical? Why has nobody told me we have internal seasons? Why has nobody taught me about my period, right? And my mom was like, we went to naturopaths and homeopaths and she did astrology. Like, maybe she was really well educated on that side of things. But even she was just like, you get your period and you deal with it, whatever. And So that changed my life. And when I got sick, I was almost finished studying clinical nutrition. I'd been a personal trainer for 10 years. I went and studied nutritional medicine, and I was almost done when I got sick. And so when I started to get well, that was like really understanding nutrition for female bodies and how we need to eat within the first hour of, waking up, or our bodies don't feel safe, or, eating cyclically, needing more fats, thyroid, gut-brain axis for women is so much more delicate than for men. So our female physiology and how we walk through the world, um, is so important. And so when we came over to breath, and when I eventually found breath work, and um, you know, just yeah, no, didn't want to do nutrition, didn't want to do any of that anymore. I was like, this. It was almost not just breath work in itself, but it was breath work as a way to access the feminine, our intuition, our physiology. That's where I get really, really excited. Simple things like our fascia changes with each phase of our cycle, which means when we're doing breath, we are going to access more or less or different things when we're breathing. How we process trauma is so much safer. An example would be, um, you know, a woman who has spent a lot of her life fawning in a breathwork scenario might actually say, yeah, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay, when actually she's having an internal panic attack and she's freaking out. And we need to understand that women, they and more than not, most women go into a lot of fawning and functional freeze. So you put them in a group setting, and you have somebody who's fawning, right? Who's so used to fawning, she doesn't learn to feel and express. In not in an unsafe environment, she goes, no, I'm okay, I'm okay, and really all she's doing is disassociating and collapsing internally, still bracing. So we have to learn about female physiology if we're going to do trauma work with women, because our bodies respond differently and they are so much more delicate. And I know I'm using that word a lot, but it is just so much more delicate than men. So when we're talking about trauma with women, when we're talking about, we just need to look at our bodies. Yeah. We need to look at how the vagus nerve inverts over our uterus. We need to understand how it's so tiny, they can't find it. We look at, what are some other, you know, the way that mammals, that we need to be in our, with our babies, attachment. We need to understand the menopause transition. We have an amazing neuroscientist in our midst, in Restore Somatica, and she taught at the last retreat about the menopause transition and what to look for in a woman who's going through that, and how different her surfacing trauma is going to look, for maybe a woman who's in her early 30s. So, yeah, we need to look at the cycles of when, the cycles of when we're still bleeding, but then we need to look at our overall cycles. Taking women out of maiden and into mother is one of the hardest transitions. I mean, obviously, I think the menopausal transition seems to be right now the hardest because we've spent years suppressing. But another really big one, again, from a patriarchal view, is, and I think don't know if it's harder from a physiological perspective, but I think it's harder from a psychological perspective of going from maiden to mother and letting go that I don't need to look 25 for the rest of my life. That I can age, and that I'm supposed to age, and that my body's supposed to change when I have babies. And, that the mothering phase is just so important. It's so, 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 so important. Learning to mother not just, our children and our families and our people, but ourselves. So that's sort of how female physiology, yeah, fits in.
Mm. Thank you.
And we could go deeper. We could go so much deeper, but I'm aware of time.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
So we have spoken about the influences of the masculine in a patriarchal society. However, equally important is the influence of the matriarch being the feminine. So why is it important to have a balanced masculine and feminine in society?
I think it's the natural law of this planet. I think yin and yang is the natural law of how we do everything and how we're supposed to do everything, and I I'll share a story that is probably the best way I can explain this that happened in my own life, and then how I noticed how deeply important that sort of ripple effect became. So when I held my first retreat, I had left quite an unhealthy, community, and I really didn't want to run it by myself. And at the time, my husband Jim, who he owns half of Restore Somatica too, which is sort of will add to this answering this question. Um, we very much founded it together. I had only at that stage really been taught by women, and I had seen the beautiful parts of what can happen when women nurture each other, and I had also seen the highly toxic parts. And so I needed to run this retreat. I didn't want to do it by myself. Jim had been studying breathwork at that point, for probably about, I'm not sure, eight months, not a long time. And I said to him, "Do you think you're ready to run this with me? Because I can't run it with anyone else." And he was like, "Yeah, we can do this." And I was like, "Groovy." I want to preface, we've been married for 23 years. We have 4 children together, and we absolutely did not think we could work together. We are so different. He's a little probably getting undiagnosed, but a bit more neurodivergent than me. and he's South American, and he's very, very, he's a lot of man, but he's incredibly safe, and he's part Native American. So he's got a lot of that access just within his DNA, just who he is naturally. So anyway, we were sort of, I'm just going to close this window. So ran this retreat together. We were about halfway through the retreat, and he was at the end of, we had everybody lined up here, and he was sort of at the end of the room, and I was this end of the room, and we looked at each other, and we had this moment of, whoa, like, it was like unraveling a whole new part of our relationship that neither one of us knew existed, and we didn't talk about it because we don't. Yeah, we were like, oh, okay, what is this? I'm seeing a different part of you, and you're seeing a different part of me, and we both remember it very clearly. We didn't talk about it because you're in retreat, you're just on. You are on 24/7. Anyway, we got in the car, and as we were packing up and we were driving to drop one of the participants at the airport, and we dropped her off, and we were just sort of holding hands, and we were chatting, and we made it to the supermarket. We were going to go grab something, some dinner for the kids. And I was like, "Hey, do you remember like that?" And he was like, "Yeah, I don't know what that was." I was like, "You felt it too? You saw it too?" And he was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Did you know we could do that?" And I was like, "No, no, I didn't." "Did you?" He's like, "Nah, nah." And it just, in hindsight, it took us a little while to figure it out. We're just both very, very in our polarities. I'm deeply feminine and have to work on my masculine side sometimes, and he's deeply masculine. And in that space, it was the safest breathwork space I have ever experienced. And I was running it, but it was because something happened energetically for us in a space, and it was on a relationship level, on a personal level, it was so profound and beautiful. And I'm so grateful that we worked together. On a, let's say, just collective yin yang, what it made me realize is how important that rebalancing of those energies, whether it be internally within self, whether that be within relationships, and that will be within, straight and homosexual relationships as well. There will always be a masculine and a feminine. And in our society, right, there has to be the polarity. It has to be balanced, because otherwise there is a whole section of what this entire planet is built on that's being suppressed. We can't suppress these parts. So in men, when they can't express their feelings, when they can't feel emotion, right? When they don't know how to articulate, they don't know how to feel, that suppression, that turns into rage. That
Mm.
turns into anger. Yeah, that turns into depression. Yeah. In women, same thing. If we don't know how to action our masculine, or if we're too far in our masculine and touch our own feminine, which is also, you know, then certain things become suppressed. We become sick. We become out of balance. So everywhere we look in the world, feminine is not necessarily flowy and beautiful. Feminine can be protective and fierce, and the dark feminine is beautiful. It's an amazing topic. It's about feminine is about the containment of the bigness. Yeah. If the masculine is about the action and the doing, then the feminine is about containing and the stillness of whatever, whether it's, a darker energy, a lighter energy, a happier energy, a more intense energy. That
Mm.
would be my take on that.
Mm.
Thing.
Yeah.
I love this topic so much. I actually am just gonna go here for a second, but what do you have to say to the people who can't wrap their head around this concept or think that it's like some like far off your cuckoo type of thing?
As in the masculine and feminine, and that,
Just
yeah,
because
and that there's an internal and masculine, feminine in
and the fact
everybody.
that yeah, the fact that that's even a concept or a very beneficial understanding for this reality in order for us to actually heal as a collective.
I think the best, if somebody can't wrap their head around it, the best place they should go and look at is traditional Chinese medicine. TCM has been talking about this for thousands of years. There is so much research on it. It's not something I am well versed in, TCM. However, they explain it beautifully with so much evidence and so much understanding of that, the action, the doing, the fire, right, of the masculine, and then the water and the stillness and the containment and the blood and the flow of the feminine. And I would say definitely go and research it in TCM, because there is just, I mean, there's literally thousands of years of amazing research there, and they explain it in a very practical and applicable way that is applicable to your everyday life. It's not just some woo-woo up here in the air concept.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Amazing.
Yep.
And
That's where I go.
and
That's
that's just
that's exactly what I wanted to hear, and that was perfect. So
Amazing.
cool. Yeah.
um you've pretty much already just spoken into this topic a little bit anyway, but as everything has the polarity of light and dark, I'd love to know
Yep.
what your experience is with the wounded feminine.
Oh, Nick.
Mm.
Nick knows a lot of my experience with the wounded feminine. Oh, getting hot. So, okay. So firstly, jokes aside, the wounded feminine is a there is a scale there, right? And there I have, as have most women, been on different ends of that scale. I sometimes call it the immature feminine, because she's not always wounded. She just doesn't know better. Yeah, she's just a system. She's just a product of this system who's told her that this is what success looks like. This is what your body needs to look like. This is what beauty look like. And she's just a product, right? It's an immaturity. She hasn't learned yet. Um, and I would say that many of us have had that experience where we've been projected on, because quite often what the immature or wounded feminine is saying is, I've got these things that I want to express, but nobody is telling me that I will be accepted or loved or validated if I express them. So they get pent up, they get cranky, they get frustrated, and when they see another woman expressing those things, they go, fuck her, how come she gets to do it and I don't? How dare she? And I'm going to rip her down for doing it, right? I think that is the generalization of the wounded or immature feminine. Now, those projections can be small. They can be the girls at school. They can be women in the workplace. They can be people on social media wanting to tear you down. Um, They can be family members, which is really, really difficult. It's a very difficult one to move through, right? A mother who doesn't want her daughter to be prettier or more successful than her, or, and then you're starting to get into the realms of the more extreme end, which is narcissism and true narcissistic personality disorder and shaming and manipulating and the smear campaigns that can happen. And I have just lovingly been on both sides of those scales and have experienced that quite intensely. And I've come to a bit of a place of peace in it all for myself. Having been on the lesser end of, yeah, copying it at school, I'm a big energy, right? I don't hold back. I'm, certainly not unkind or anything like that, but I definitely have always been pretty good at expressing myself. I think that was very triggering for girls at school. So I've often been on the other end of those types of projections. Um, in my own sort of, hmm, I guess, professional world, those projections have been much bigger. And I've had full-blown smear campaigns. I've been on the other end of really horrendous narcissistic abuse. And I've been on that sort of, yeah, smear campaigns, where I have a solicitor and a detective on speed dial that have nice big fat, you know, um, what's the word? I don't know what the word is, but files like on some of the things that I've been through in my professional life and definitely in more recent years. And the place that I've come to is actually really lovely and it's really nice. And I'm really happy here because what I have worked out is number one, we do choose these scenarios. We choose them because we've got something to learn, right? On some level, we are choosing these scenarios when the wounded feminine is projecting onto us, when we are copying it really hard from other women. There is something in that for us. We are choosing it. We have got some really important piece to learn. And for me, it was personally just to learn that, and it seems so simple when I say it now, it was just to go be myself. It was just to do the things that I'm being guided to do and be myself and be comfortable with the fact that not everyone's going to like me when I do it, you know? And I had to really cop an extreme side of that. And it taught me just how um, resilient and important it is for women to learn to fully embody themselves, to fully embody the things they like, they dislike, what they stand for, what they don't, and being absolutely okay with copying it, and copying people's projections. These days, those projections, I have a giggle. I send it off to my people, they deal with it, and I keep moving on. I couldn't, the girl I was 5 years ago could not have done that. No way. No way. That would have dropped me into an absolute puddle. I would have gone, why don't they like me? What have I done wrong? How do I fix it? How do I placate them? All the little fawning things. Maybe not 5 years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, but you know, I would have really found a way to appease what was happening as opposed to be like, meh, can't please everyone. So I think with the wounded feminine and the immature feminine, it's a bit of an important rite of passage for most of us. Um, and in that, we become better at setting boundaries, holding those boundaries, saying who we are, expressing ourselves more fully, which has got to be the whole point. It has to be the whole point, because otherwise, why do we come here with these thoughts and dreams and hopes? And it doesn't make any sense unless they're supposed to actually be expressed and put out into the world, right? So I think, yeah, that's sort of my take on the wounded feminine and the immature feminine. And I have a lot of compassion for women who are still stuck in that place. I don't look at them and be like, oh, they're so horrible and they did this and they did that. And then I go, oh, dude, I know where you are. And that's a hard place because we've all been there. We have all been the unsafe women. We have all been stuck in our little wounded, immature selves. And the journey is to just come on and out of it, right? The journey, and it's beautiful and it can be beautiful. Um, I won't downplay it and say that it's fun. It's not a fun journey to go through. It's definitely not sexy in any way. It's not comfortable, but it's really important. It's an important rite of passage that I think most women need to go through.
Yeah, and I absolutely love your perspective on it because it's true compassion for all stages and not putting shame on the inexperience or the not knowing or the not, because we are coming here to learn essentially. So, thank you
Exactly.
for that
Yeah.
potent explanation.
You're
Also,
welcome.
also too, what's coming to me like so strongly is just self-expression in general, and the fact that um you are receiving like this extreme end as a result of your own personal self-expression. Would you agree?
Completely. And
Yeah.
it's and for my own personal sort of expansion, one of the things I think I was speaking to Nick about this at the retreat. I was speaking to a few of the girls. I said, I realized I have a real gift at turning pain into purpose. If you tell me I can't do something or you're coming at me real hard, like I'm going, okay, this is going to be fun. Watch me. It's the Scorpio in me. I just go, no, no. And it's not even out of anger. It's not a fuck you. It's not anything. It's just like, thank you for underestimating me. For underestimating me. I needed that. I needed that little bit of right? And so because of that, you're able to exactly step into these huge amounts of self-expression, and it will trigger people. There is no person I have come across, at least in my time doing this work, where at least one person in a woman's life is not upset with them when they have stepped into a much bigger version of their own expression, because people want to keep you small so they can stay small. And again, we have compassion for those people, but we also just go, I'm just going to leave you there. You can be on that shelf. I'm hopping over to this one.
Exactly. I think
Yeah.
that's very important for anyone listening who is scared to express themselves or follow their own unique path or their soul path or whatever it is, because this is like one of the most challenging things to overcome.
Oh,
When you actually start to embody your soul expressions, right? Um, it is triggering to other people. So this is just a friendly message that regardless of how extreme it can get, it's still okay to follow the path. It's still
yeah.
okay to be all of you, right? It's still
Yeah.
okay to express yourself because you're going to hold that for all the other women after you.
Yeah, and I think that that was something that, because it can get extreme. Like
Yeah.
I said, I have a
Yeah.
detective and a solicitor
Yeah.
literally on speed dial. It can
Mhm.
get really extreme. People can work incredibly hard and put an immense amount of energy to want to not let you rise, right? They really can. It was baffling to me. It was actually insane to me. And but like I said, that that little bit of fight, that little bit of you can't was a really, for me personally, was really helpful. I also respect that it's not helpful for some people, that for some nervous systems, that is going to feel like death.
Yeah.
Yeah, that the people who try to stop you, or they're not even trying to stop you, essentially. It's almost not personal. It's an unconscious attack from them a lot of the time too, that are not supporting your expansion, not supporting your changes or your transformation or your healing or whatever you're going through. It is quite unconscious. Their nervous systems will be like, you're changing now. I'm not safe and I've got to pull you back here. I see this a lot, unfortunately, with husbands do this to wives because I work with so many women and they change so quickly. I often say to them, you got to have compassion for him because there's another version of you coming out now. And he's like, whoa, where did she come from? Jim and I went through it as well. It was we don't fight a lot, but we had one big fight where he was like, but you're not the same person. And I said, and I'm so sorry, I'm never going to be. I'm never going to be her. So we either need to find a way with this new version of me. And he did, and he was great. But it is. It can be partners, it can be parents, it can be children, it can be work, colleagues. Anyone in your community can really come along and be like, absolutely not, you should not go there, you should not do this. And it's their own fears and it's their own terrors. And for some people who are trying to make that change, yeah, their nervous systems, they feel like they're in death losing those people or dealing with those attacks, right? It can be, yeah. So I think it's really important to say to speak that to the person who feels like there's just no way they could do thing X. Listen to me. Thing X is coming into your awareness because it wants to be expressed. Yeah? It wouldn't be there then. It just wouldn't. It just wouldn't be there. You'd want to become an astronaut instead.
Hmm.
It would be something else. It would be something different. So the desire is the roadmap. The desire is where it's taking you. And I'm also here to say, like, and if you lose people along the way, that's okay, because you are going to gain so much more than you lose. So much more. I could never ever have predicted what would come out of my life when I walked away from, some really, really unhealthy scenarios. And it is tenfold completely.
I absolutely agree. Thank you for sharing all of that. It's so relatable for anyone in this realm, on this path, doing the work, healing. So
Yeah.
it's so great to like share your experience so that other people can relate and know that they're not alone as well. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
So we're going to shift a little bit here and we're going to actually speak into your body of work
Hmm.
now. So tell us, what is Restore Somatica and how does it ensure and restore safety for the feminine to heal within self and community, noting that there is feminine within men as well?
Yeah, okay. Um, I guess the aim of Restore Somatica was to bring female physiology to the forefront of breathwork and somatics, um, but especially breathwork because it tends to happen a lot in somatics. Um, there are some amazing somatic educators out there who specialize in female physiology. Some of them have been my teachers and the women before me, and but I didn't see it happening in breath work. Breath work was wherever I looked for the past few years, there was all this focus on push and activation, and we still push in Restore Somatica, I assure you. And we still provide an environment for activation. But when you start looking at it through female physiology, um, you have to understand that the female nervous system, it needs safety, it needs connection, it needs certain responses that I just witnessed men in this space and women who, and I'm going to say this quite bluntly, still had a lot of internalized misogyny. Um, they didn't just let women be women in this space. And as far as we know, um, we're the only breathwork school that actually teaches through female physiology and the female lens in this country. As we've gone looking, and I went looking because I went looking for what I created. I was not ever intending to build a breathwork school ever. I cannot, I cannot, yeah, I cannot say that enough. Like, this was not the intention. I actually just got very sick with a double ear infection 3 years ago that landed me in hospital. Nick will remember. And I went deaf for a month. And in that time, did a lot of meditating. I do a lot of vocal work and vocal channeling and sounding and things like that. And I was just meditating on the bed right behind me. And I just went into this really, really deep state. I wasn't doing breath work, wasn't doing anything. I was just sort of healing my ears. I couldn't hear anything outside myself, which make of that what you will. And and I was literally shown, this is what the business is going to be called. This is what you're going to do. these are the people you're going to train. And I came up out of that, and the words came out of my mouth. Fuck no. There was no way I was doing this. And about 3 weeks later, I went back to work, and the client I had said, I really want to do this work and I want you to teach me. And I was like, I can't, like, I'm not in a position, I didn't feel like I'd been doing it long enough for all these things. And, but I made note because that just kept happening over and over and over and over. I cannot explain how many people then started saying, and I was like to my husband, and he said, you have to do this. And I actually went as far as spending over $10,000 to go to another school to check them out, to send the people who were asking me to teach them to see if it would be good. This is a true story and I'm somewhat embarrassed about. To see if it would be good enough, because I knew what I wanted to teach. I knew if I was ever going to teach, but I still was not at a place where I was like, no way, I'm not teaching that. And I went, and it was the biggest waste of money ever. And it only really confirmed to me how, oh my God, there's nobody out here teaching the way that I can visualize. And the way that I facilitated breathwork really, really changed in the last few years. And it changed when I started studying somatics and polyvagal theory, and with a couple of amazing people in the States that taught me so much about female nervous systems. And so breath started to change for me. And I was like, as in breath work, the therapy. And my clients started to change, and they started to have better results, and they started to have faster results in some ways, safer results. They could contain themselves, they could self-hold so much better. So yeah, I avoided this really hardcore. Like, it's laughable now. But what we created was this system in the end that, number one, I'm proud of, but also am constantly adding to. It's just become a bit of an obsession. And it centers on the fact that breathwork is incredibly powerful, but we can't do the same thing to men as we do for women. And I remember one of the guys in our course going, yeah, so we're talking about the female nervous system. He goes, yeah, what about the male one? I said, well, you've been taught that for the last 20, 30, 40, 500 years. He was like, oh yeah, I get it. Yes, I understand. I said, you already know that. You already know what's happening there. He's like, oh yeah. I was like, every other piece of information out there. It's based on, studying the male nervous system. So Restore Somatica was really just this, it was a directive, really. It was a directive that said, hey, this is your path. You got free will. You don't have to choose it. But I did, and I'm so grateful that I did. And I think it's really important. I want to say that, yes, while we focus on female physiology, that if you are a man and you want to do this work and you think you're going to hold women, you also need to learn female physiology. That's part of your responsibility too. Some of the men don't like that. No, breath work's the same. It's no, it's really not. So I want to reinitiate all humans back into their intuition, into the feminine, right? I want them to reclaim the body as this place of such communication and vital sacredness that you get back in there. And it's almost, I had one teacher say, and I love this so much, she said, it's an act of activism to be reconnected to the body, because there's so much happening outside of us and we're so distracted, right? And the more we're in our heads, the more we're in our upper chakras, the more easily we are distracted and tricked and kind of brainwashed. That honesty, yeah, that realness, that presence, that's in the body. So it's this act of activism to get back in the body, to reassemble your feminine, to reinitiate yourself back into your own intuition. That's sort of, yeah, that's how Restore Somatica came about, and that's its working hypothesis at the moment.
Yeah, and being a part of Restore Somatica and the 12-month facilitators course that you are speaking to has truly been like I've studied at uni, I've studied multiple degrees, I've studied multiple courses, and not just blowing smoke up your ass. It is actually in a realm of its own to be able to spend weekly calls with you, like just learning how to come back into the body, like what is somatics, what is breath, all the different elements, and then to do our retreat. And then we still have our mentorship element that we're phasing through now, where you and your wonderful husband, Jim, are still so supportive. And it's truly created this potent container, not only for women, but for men as well, to come out as safe breathwork facilitators. So well done to you, Lex, because it is a true testament to one, you following your path and taking the, I'm going to say, quote unquote, hard road, because I know it's not been an easy journey to now. But yeah, just leaning in. Like there's, we all speak to as healers and people that sit on the side of helping other people through troubled times, like resistance, and how hard it is to like meet the resistance and actually lean in. But yeah, you're a true testament to that. So thank you so much for creating Restore Somatica. Because yeah, we wouldn't be here without you.
I have goosebumps and tears.
Yeah.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for that reflection. And to watch all of you, every single one came out of that retreat running. You all hit the ground running. I said to them all, and I don't think I'm speaking out of school here. I think they'd be happy for me to share this, that I was ill prepared for the pride of watching all of these guys go out, because every single one of them has started, doing their practice sessions, meeting up with each other, doing groups. Like it was just instant. It was that first week you all came out, and I just was like, and Jim will tell you, like he or I cried every day. We were like, oh my God, they're doing it. Oh my God, they're doing it. This has worked, because your first time, it's an experiment.
Mm.
It was a highly educated experiment, but it was an experiment. And watching them all has been just, I was not prepared for the absolute outpouring of joy and pride, and it's like watching your toddlers take their first steps, right? It was just like, oh my, but they are obviously much older, and I don't mean that in a patronizing way in any way. They're incredible humans of their own right. But it's been a phenomenal journey to get to this point.
Mm. So, for anyone listening, would you be able to tell our listeners how they could continue to follow and support your work with breath or with Restore Somatica?
So we have our Instagram, which is Restore Somatica, and we have a new website being built at the moment. So it is www.restoresomatica.com. Right now, I don't know if it's closed down or if that will lead you to my old website, lexymaturana.com. But there's a lot of good info on there if you want to read it. We didn't rush out to build a website. We sort of went very, very slowly on everything, and we just sort of put all our time and effort into you guys, and have worked out. Now we already have like enrollments for our next course. So we were like, oh, yeah, okay, we need an online presence. We're going to actually have to pull our finger out. So that started. So yeah, you can jump onto restoresomatica.com, or you can follow me at Restore Somatica on Instagram.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
And finally, for the
Yeah.
women listening who know they are here for more, which I know we're all very well attuned with, what is one truth or piece of advice you can leave with them as they are rising into their next level?
I think the thing I would leave them with, that I wish I had been told a lot longer ago, was nothing new happens in the known, and nothing new feels comfortable or safe initially. When we're looking at, and obviously I'm going to speak from like the brain and the nervous system, the brain and our nervous system, especially as women, we look for familiar. That's why we can go back to shitty relationships or shitty jobs, or, places we don't really want to live, or environments, because our brain and our nervous system, it looks for familiar. So when you are up leveling, if you are very aware that it will not feel safe, It will not feel, comfortable, you know, um, that you're probably going the right direction. And you just have to really, 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 um, you really, really have to facilitate a relationship with your own heart and your own sacral. So if you're a man listening to this, your sacral or your womb, whatever works. So they're potent in both sexes. And you really have to cultivate that relationship in your body to know that you're going the right way, because everything in your body might tell you, run the opposite way. This is going to kill you. We talk about this going into retreats, right? Nearly every single person coming into the second part of their course, which was their facilitator retreat, had some major resistance. And it's because the ego is going, hang on, and the nervous system, we're safe here, we're safe. So don't change. Please, oh my God, don't change. And yeah, I think that's what I would leave people with. It doesn't feel comfortable. It's not going to for a little bit. But on the other side of it, you'll get that kick of joy or contentment, or some really, and you'll be like, oh, that was cool. Yeah, that was cool. I'm going to do that again. And you might need to do it a few more times. You might need to build the muscle, right? But nothing new happens in the known. You have to step into the unknown. You have to step into the fear. You have to have an immense amount of courage.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's
Thank
the
you so much.
takeaway, girls. You're so welcome. So welcome. Thank you for having me, girls. This has been such a pleasure.
Oh,
It's been fun.
A pleasure to have you on.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm so like
Thank you so
captivated. I've been, yeah, it's amazing. So I
It's
know
good.
that our listeners are going to absolutely love this episode. So thank you,
Yeah,
Lexi, for
pleasure,
joining us.
Taylor. Thank you. Thank you, girls. It's just been an honor.
Thank
It's
you.
amazing. So as always, we would love to hear how this episode landed for you guys in the comments. You can follow us on Spotify, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to receive instant access to all new episodes. And you can connect with all of us on social media. Our links are in the show notes below, and we can't wait to see you on our next episode of Women Who Rise.
Yay.